Namaste, and once again a warm welcome to all of you. Let us see where Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi takes us today as we explore Sat Darshanam, also known as 40 verses on reality, and it was composed in Tamil by Bhagavan, where it is called Ulladu Narpadu, 40 verses on reality. So last time, as Sri Jankiram was just telling us, we took up the first shloka, the first invocatory shloka. We have 40 shlokas plus 2 invocatory shlokas. So we took the first invocatory shloka and explored the depth of meaning. We also did a little bit of sadhana. So today let us go on to the second shloka. Before we go on to the second shloka, we will also chant the first shloka, briefly look at its translation, and then move to the second one. Let me just share the presentation with all of you. Please let me know if you can see it.
Yes, we can see it, Johnny.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I'm just trying to keep the screen clear. So, excuse me. I would like to acknowledge my source of inspiration, Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi, who is the composer of the 40 shlokas on reality. And we have Sri Narasimha Prabhuji, who is also my mentor. He is my guide. He is my Sadguru, guiding me on the path of direct knowledge or self-inquiry. Then Sri Shankaracharya, who has left behind a huge amount of literature on Advaita Vedanta. To all of them and to all Sadgurus who illumine our paths, I offer my prostrations. Let us chant Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Asatoma Satkamaya together, keeping our mic on mute. Let us close our eyes, chant those 2 shlokas together. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo, Maheshwaraha, Gurur Sakshat, Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Asato ma Sadgamaya Tamaso ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let us offer our pranams at the lotus feet of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. and all the Sadgurus who inspire us in our paths. May their grace, may their blessings flow down in great abundance and light the lamp of awareness within us. I also thank the School of Ancient Wisdom and the organizing committee of this program, Sajni, Ravi, Sri Jankiram ji, Malti, and all those, Aniket, anybody who is involved in organizing these programs, recording these talks. So, as we said, today we are going to take up the second shloka, but before that, let us chant the first shloka. Somebody is not on mute. Could you please check?
Yeah.
Ravi, could you please mute everybody?
Mr. Ganeshan's for
Muted? Yeah. All are muted.
Okay, thank you, Ravi. We are
Ganeshan's is
recording,
not
right?
muted. Yeah.
Yeah, it's recording.
Okay, thank you. So let us chant. I will chant once, then we will chant together each line. Satpratyaya kim nu vihaya santam. Satpratyaya kim nu vihaya santam. Hridyesha chinta rahito hridakhyah. Hridyesha chinta rahito hridakhyah. Katham smaramastamameyamekam. Katham smaramastamameyamekam. Tasya smritistatra dridhaiva nishtha. Tasya smritistatra dridhaiva nishtha. So, as we said last time, two people have translated, two devotees have translated Ramana's Ulladanarpada into Sanskrit. One is Sri Kavyakanta Ganapati Muni, and who was a great poet and very famous personality during those times. And the other one is Sri Lakshman Sharma, who kept on modifying, revising the translation until Bhagavan was satisfied. So we are chanting Sri Ganapati Muni's Saddarshanam, but we are looking at the translation, English translation of both devotees. So this is what we chanted just now. Without something that exists, can there be notions of existence? So we feel that all the time, the only thing about which we never get out, the time we are born till we die, it is that I exist. Each one of us, we are so sure that we exist. It is a constant, direct experience for us, constant, direct knowledge. So that's what Sri Ramana is referring to. He is saying, if something did not exist constantly, then would you feel that? How could you be so sure that you exist all the time without something that actually exists all the time? So last time we also said there is a definition for Sat. Many of you beautifully typed definitions on the chat. Things like truth, reality, and so on. So Sat means existence. Sat means that which exists always. It has no birth, no death. There can be no modification. There can be no discontinuity in its existence. So it is eternal, it is infinite, it is changeless. It is birthless and deathless. So that, with a capital T, that is called Sat. And that is not different from us. We are Sat. We are the truth. So Bhagavan is saying, without that Sat, which exists all the time, could you be sure about every single thing? We get a little doubt. There may be somebody whom we trust implicitly in our life, a friend or your spouse or a family member or someone. Even about them now and then you can get a little doubt. That this time, is what this person is saying, is it really what I should follow? Yes, I know they have my good interest in me, but that giggling little thing over there. We can get doubts about our own competence. We do. Our self-esteem is fluctuating. Can I do this? Will I be able to manage this? And so on. The only thing about which we don't get a doubt is that I exist. So that is because there is something, there is a substratum that is all the time existing. Second line, free of thoughts it is there, the inner being named the heart. So we also saw that state is a thought-free state. We feel that it is indescribable. We are told that it cannot be understood, it cannot be conceived. Then how can we conceive it? Is the question. So to conceive it is to be it in the heart. In Upadesha Saram also, Bhagavan pointed out many times, to be the self is to see the self, because there are no two. Here Lakshman Sharma points out, there be a sense of existence or I without something that exists, is reality or consciousness something other than that? Since that reality dwells thought-free in the heart and is itself named the heart, how can it be meditated upon? And who is there distinct from it? The self, whose nature is reality or consciousness, to meditate on it. To know that to meditate on it is to be one with it in the heart. So there are no two. There is not a person who is aware of the self and the self, because then self becomes an object, but self is the subject. So Lakshman Sharma, through his translation, actually, of course, he's pointing out what Sri Ramana has said. He says there are no two. There is only one reality, and you are that. And for each person, there is not one different self. For Vani, there is a different self. For Padmini, there is a different self. For Malati, there is a different self. For Ganeshan, there is a different self. It's not like there is only one. There is only one self with a capital S. And we are all manifestations of that one self. We are all appearances, manifesting and unmanifesting. Just like a screen. The screen is there, then different characters come on the screen, flit across, disappear. More characters come, they flit across, they disappear. But the screen is changeless. It changes the substratum for all the appearances and that come and go. So like that, there are no two. So there is no meditator and something to meditate upon. You can only be it. You are already the self. But we are not able to perceive it. We are not able to recognize it, recognize something which is already there. We are not able to cognize it. So the entire journey of self-knowledge, entire journey of self-exploration or self-realization is only to recognize what is already existing. So that is the entire journey. So we are coming to invocatory shloka 2. Now invocatory shloka 1 is all about self-inquiry. You inquire, who am I? You let go of what you are not, the body, mind and intellect. You don't let go of the body, mind and intellect, but you let go of the belief that you are the body, mind and intellect. So when I let go of that, then what happens is, what remains is me, that is the self. So that is the path of self-inquiry. Now Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi always said, there are only two paths. One is the path of self-inquiry and the other is the path of surrender or Sharanagati. So the first shloka is talking about self-inquiry. The second shloka is talking about Prapatti or Sharanagati. Let us chant it, lead and repeat as we did the previous shloka. Mrityunjayam mrityubhiyashritanam Mrityunjayam mrityubhiyashritanam Aham matir mrityumupaiti purvam Aham matir mrityumupaiti purvam Atha svabhavat amriteshu teshu Atha svabhavat amriteshu teshu Katham punar mrityu dhiyo vakashaha Katham punar mrityu dhiyo vakashaha Mrityunjayam. Mrityunjayam means the conqueror of death, one who has won over death, has gained victory over death. It is also a name of Lord Shiva. Mrityu Jayam, the conqueror of death. Mrityu Bhiya. Mrityu is death. Bhiya is Bhaya or fear. So the fear of death, Ashritanam, to take refuge, to take ashraya. So when one has this overwhelming fear of death and he or she seeks the grace of Mrityunjayam, Lord, who has no birth and no death. So when you seek the refuge of maybe Lord Shiva or any other deity or even the self or the Guru, you seek refuge saying, protect me from death. I don't see any way in which I can avoid death. But this fear of death, I'm obsessed by the fear of death. Please help me. Please protect me. So when somebody seeks protection, when somebody surrenders like that, then aham atihi mrityum upaiti purvam. Aham, small self, the ahankara, the feeling that I am the body, mind and intellect, that is gone. The ego dies. Ego dies, upaiti, it is lost. Purvam, very fast. It doesn't take a long time. It happens very swiftly when one surrenders to Mrityunjaya. Athat svabhavat amriteshu teshu. Teshu, for such ones who have surrendered. Athat svabhavat, whatever is their true nature. Svabhava. Sva is one's own. Bhava, nature. So what is What is their true nature? What has always been their true nature? Amriteshu, immortality. So to be immortal is their true nature, not only their true nature, it is the nature of all of us, because that is the self. The self is immortal. Remember, it has no birth, no death, no change. So, atha swabhavat amriteshu teshu, for such beings, their true nature of immortality is, it remains. When the ego dies, what remains? Only the self, which is immortal, remains. Katham punar mrityu dhiyo avakashaha. Katham, how? Punaha, once again. Mrityu, death. Dhiyo, can attack the intellect. Avakashaha, opportunity. Then how can there be an opportunity for the intellect once again to experience the fear of death? So for those souls who surrender to the Lord out of fear of death, then very quickly their ego is demolished, and what remains is their true nature of immortality, of eternity. Then for such beings, how can the fear of death have an opportunity of attacking them once again? It is the intellect that panics. So how can the intellect of such a person be attacked by the fear of death once again? So let us read the translation of this shloka, which was authored by Ganapati Muni. Those who seek refuge in Mrityunjaya, the conqueror of death, due to fear of death, at once lose the I or ego or the small self. Then by nature, they are immortal. Where is the opportunity for them to be assailed by the thought of death again? And what does Lakshman Sharma say? Men of pure minds who fear death intensely surrender themselves to the Lord of all. So here is one extra point which is very important. Men of pure minds. So it doesn't happen to everybody. Asuras also had fear of death. What did every Asura do? We hear of so many Asuras in the Puranas. Hiranyakashipu was there, Bhasmasura was there, Kaitaba were there, Mahishasura were there, all of them. What did they do? They were scared of death. So they said to Brahma, Vishnu or Shiva, whom they had done tapasya, they asked, they said, make us immortal. But when the Lord appeared, and when they appeared and said, it is not possible to give you immortality, because immortality is not a part of the physical domain. Laws of the physical domain will not allow immortality. Therefore, you can choose the way in which you want to die. So every demon said, they said, thought were impossible conditions. Hiranyakashipu said, I should not die in the day, during the day, I should not die during the night. I should not die inside, I should not die outside. I should not be killed by demon, I should not be killed by animals. I should not be killed by human beings. And he thought he had an ironclad framework. But we know that Vishnu came as Narasimha, half lion, half human, sat on the threshold, neither inside nor outside, and he killed Hiranyakashipu. So, men of pure minds, asuras don't have pure minds. Asuras are also portrayal of our own qualities. We too have ambitions. We can be sadistic. We can think of our own good. We can put our own good above the good of others. We do it sometimes. Some people do it more often, some people do it less often, and those with pure minds, they always put the good of others first. Always walk on the path of dharma. Walking on the path of dharma means not to go against the cosmic laws, not to see the good in others. Always be benevolent towards other people. So these are all sattva gunas. So men or human beings who have pure minds, when their mind is very pure, then if they fear death intensely and surrender themselves to the Lord of all, then the blissful one, the indwelling self, who is free from birth and death, through surrender, their ego along with their attachments is extinguished. So purity means already they have seen. Nothing in this world can give me lasting happiness. Greatest wealth, greatest fame, the most fulfilling relationship, nothing can give me lasting happiness. The clarity is there in a pure mind. And when they surrender with total intensity, then the belief that I am the body, mind, and intellect is gone. When the belief that I am the body, mind, and intellect is gone, automatically any kind of attachment to possessions, to relationships, to people, to wealth, to health, to everything disappears. What does it mean to lose attachment? It means there is neither like nor dislike. There is not this hankering, I want this, I want this. Neither is there a rejection. I don't want this. I never want this. Let me not get this illness. Let me not get these circumstances in my life. Let poverty never come into my life. Let me never face humiliation. So I want this, I don't want this. That is attachment. I don't want something is also attachment. I want something is also attachment. So when the ego goes, when my attachment, when my identification with the body, mind, and intellect dissolves, automatically anything that is connected to the body, mind, and intellect has no power to disturb me. Because I am the blissful one, I am the indwelling self. I am free from birth and death, I am free from sorrow. Sorrow comes from like dislike. Dislike comes from attachment to the concept that I am the body, mind, and intellect. Therefore, when the ego is surrendered, and the ego goes, ego is nothing but identification with BMI, body, mind, intellect, then all other attachments are gone. What do we think? We think, oh, I have to give up my attachment to sweets. I eat too many sweets. Let me start reducing the sweets. Or when we go to Kashi, some people have this custom. They give up their favorite fruit, favorite vegetable, favorite sweet, favorite snack. Some of them cheat and give up something that they don't like. So one by one, we think we drop attachments. I'm too attached to my child. I'm always thinking of my child, whatever else I'm doing. So let me reduce attachment. No, it doesn't work like that. Because all these attachments are springing from one I thought. What is that I thought? I am the body, mind, and intellect. So when you surrender the I thought, when you surrender the ego, automatically everything that is attached to the ego is also gone. So instead of giving up attachment one after the other, an infinite number of attachments, you give up one more will come. So Bhagavan is saying, instead of that, surrender the concept that I am the body, Dehātma Buddhi, at the feet of the Lord. Then all attachments will be gone at one shot. And you will realize that you are the blissful one. So how can they, Lakshman Sharma says, how can they, the last line of the translation, having one abode in immortality, have any thought of death? So when I am the infinite immortal self, how can any thought of death come to me? First example is state of deep sleep. When we are in the state of deep sleep, when there is no identification with the body, mind, or intellect, during those hours or minutes of deep sleep, does any fear attack us? Any desire attack us? We feel complete, content, for no desire can arise. There is no other for desire to arise in deep sleep. And there is no other for fear to arise also. If there is another, then I can be scared of that person or that entity or that circumstance. But there is no other. I exist in deep sleep. So where is fear? And where is desire? Neither are there. The same way, the state of silence in the self. Let us observe that having one abode in immortality, not to go there and come back. In Nirvikalpa Samadhi, I will go there. I am in this beautiful thoughtless state. I am so peaceful, so happy. I feel there is no other. But when I come back from that meditation, from that Samadhi, once again, there is plurality. There is plurality in my perception. I feel that I am different from the world and different from God. That is only visiting. You only have a visiting visa. Deep sleep, visiting visa. If I am all the time in deep sleep, it's called coma. I am dysfunctional. All the time if I am in samadhi, again that doesn't work. Because life has to go on. I have to eat. I have to survive. Those are visiting visas. What is a permanent visa? To abide in immortality, never come out. That is called Sahaja Samadhi. Keep doing everything as you are. All your roles, you carry on with all your roles, you carry on with all your responsibilities. You play each role to perfection. Still, even when you are doing something so mundane as reading the newspaper or cooking in the kitchen or just surfing the net or watching TV, even then, outwardly you appear to be so involved in what you're doing, but within every moment you are aware of your true identity. You know that you are immortal. You know that you are beyond birth and death. You know that you are bliss. You are. That is called having one abode in immortality.
One
Now-
clarification, Vani.
Yeah.
See, the first sentence in the verse that is translation, that means what? Men of pure mind must fear death intensely?
No, no, no. Men of pure minds, human beings who have understood life and who have transited from tamoguna, rajoguna. That means to think only of my own good and ignoring other people. That is tamoguna. Rajoguna, for me, good for them. I will do this for you if you do something for me. You have transcended that also. Then you have come to the state where yourself is expanded. That means you would not like to take any step which does not involve the good of everybody. Lokaha samastaha sukhino bhavantu. We chant it at the end. But men with pure minds, they live it every moment. Or women with pure minds live it every moment. So for them, walking the talk is part of their lives. But still, that subtle separation is there. I am different. Others, yes, others are a part of me, but still they are a little different. God is a part of me, but still there is separation. So as long as there is separation, there is fear. For Ramana Maharshi himself, what happened? All of a sudden, he was overcome by fear of death. So for such a person, somebody has to mute it. For such a person, if fear of death happens to arise, and when it arises, if that person surrenders to Lord, then it can be a very powerful catapulting force which can take you to self-knowledge, to abidance in the self. Was that clear?
Thank you.
So here we are looking at the picture of a very, very old man. He's supposed to have lived up to the age of 146 years, an Indonesian. There is a little controversy about whether the 146 is right or whether his papers were forged and so on. But at the same time, there is no doubt that he definitely lived well beyond 100. So it doesn't matter to us whether it was 146 or 120 or 110 or whatever it is. So his lifespan was really so long. He had 10 siblings, all of them died before him. He had 4 wives. He had plenty of children. They all died before him. He outlived all of them. And when somebody asked him, "What is now your dearest desire?" he said, "What I want is to die." Physical immortality is not really a piece of cake. We may think it's a wonderful thing. If I never had to die, how wonderful. But then in that case, everybody has to be immortal, and everybody has to remain young, and everybody has to remain healthy. So this is not within the laws of the universe. These laws apply to all of us. The body grows old, the body can fall sick. We have seen old people as they grow old, difficult for them to walk, they get bent over, eyesight declines, hearing declines, all kinds of diseases may come and ride, piggyback on them. So life can become miserable. So physical immortality is really not what Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi is talking about. And in fact, if we were to analyze, it is not what we want also. Yet, at the same time, all of us, every moment we feel, okay, people keep dying around us, but somehow No, it may not apply to me. That is why when a Yaksha asks Dharmaraya, the eldest of the Pandavas, what is the strangest thing on earth? He says the strangest thing is every day we see people dying around us, but I feel that I will never die. So this I will never die, this certainty which is there in us a good part of the time, that is actually coming from the self with a capital S. The self never dies and we are the self. Therefore, we keep feeling that I will never die. It is the body that dies actually. But then we superimpose the body on that and then we say, okay, everybody dies. So it is not physical death or physical immortality that we are talking about. It is self-knowledge. It is identification, permanent abidance in the immortal, in the eternal. So as I said, there were many demons. Madhu and Kaitaba, two pieces of earwax fell out of Mahavishnu's ears as he was in Yoga Nidra, and they fell into the Kshira Sagara. He stays in the middle of the Kshira Sagara, and they became two demons, Madhu and Kaitaba. They asked for a boon from Devi that we can never be killed in water, because all around them they saw only the Kshira Sagara. Finally, Lord Vishnu put them on his thigh and he killed them out of water, but still in the middle of the Kshira Sagara. Hiranyakashipu we already saw. Mohini Bhasmasura. Bhasmasura got a boon that he places his hand on anybody's head, they will get converted into, instantly they become ash. Bhasma, ash. But Vishnu came as Mohini, a beautiful damsel, and they had a dancing competition. And as she was dancing, she said, whatever step I do, you have to repeat. Then I will marry you. So whatever step she does, he is mimicking. And dancing, she places her own hand on her head. So Bhasmasura does the same thing and he is reduced to ashes. So come across all these asuras seeking physical immortality. And in our own lives, in a sort of unconscious way, we also seek immortality without being conscious of it. We say, I know my name should remain even after I pass away. So I may set up a lot of trusts. I may set up institutions. Good. It is all seva activity. But somewhere in a corner of the mind, without my even being aware of it, there is this desire, I should not be forgotten. Yes, I'm helping a lot of people. Many people are benefiting from scholarships, from funds given to them. But at the same time, somewhere there is this seed. No, I should not be forgotten after my death. I should live on. My name should live on. Or my fame should live on. I discover a famous law. E is equal to mc squared. So my fame lives on. My knowledge lives on. Or my progeny. Great-grandfather, grandfather, father, son, grandson. So my lineage. Through my children, through my grandchildren, through my great-grandchildren, I should live on. So these are all unconscious desires, how we seek immortality in unconscious ways. So in our life, there are two great motivating forces which are working all the time. One is love. We like doing things which give us pleasure, which give us satisfaction, which give us happiness, which we enjoy. So we do things on one hand because we like doing them. We like spending time with friends. So there are so many things. We love painting, so we sit. or we do things out of fear. I don't want my boss to shout at me. So even though I don't feel like doing this project or working so hard or staying up in the night, I do it. I want the next installment of the project money to be released, but it will not be released unless I send this part, this phase of the project to them. So out of fear that I may lose that project, out of fear that I may not get that money, I will sit and do something. So constantly we are doing things because we love doing them, or we are doing them because we are scared that if we don't do it, the repercussions will not be what I like. So these are two motivating forces which are always working consciously, many times unconsciously, motivating us to do things, to complete things, motivating us into action or into gaining knowledge. So both of them are very powerful. Both of them are very powerful. In this case, Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi is referring to the motivating force of fear. In this particular shloka, he is dealing with the motivating force of fear. So also looking at Mrityunjaya. Mrityunjaya, the word plays an important role in this shloka. So as we also discussed, this name, one of the names of Lord Shiva. How did Lord Shiva earn this name? So we know the legend of Markandeya. We know the story of Markandeya from Markandeya Purana. Just a quick recollection, I'm not going into great detail of the legend. The parents of Markandeya, they were very devout sage couple, and didn't have children for a long time. So when they prayed to Lord Shiva, he said, "You have a choice. I can give you 100 children who will live for a long time. They will live for 100 years. I can give you many children who will live for 100 years. But they will not be virtuous. They will create a lot of trouble, not just for themselves, for a lot of people. Or I can give you one child who will be a gem, a great bhakta. So such a person, such a son will live only for 16 years. So you please make a choice." So parents say, how can we ask for somebody who will trouble others? Let our son be a virtuous one who lives for 16 years. So he is born, he is called Markandeya. So Markandeya, he is very devoted, he learns the Vedas, he learns the Upanishads, he is a great devotee of Lord Shiva, and he is the darling of the entire village. So can everybody hear me? Okay, good, thank you. So he's the darling of the village. Now he's 12 years, he's 13, he's 14, he's 15. So when he reaches the 15th year, both the parents are plunged into grief. Markandeya notices that they're not as usually. They're both very lively, very cheerful, happy people. But now they're very morose. They try to hide it from him. But he says, no, tell me what is wrong. So then they tell him, this is the boon that Shiva gave us. So your 16th year is approaching. Your 16th birthday is approaching. And you will die. So he said, no, don't worry. So when his 16th birthday is due, he goes to the Shiva. He hugs the Shivalinga and he begins to pray. It is said that he was chanting the Mahamrityunjaya mantra. We will look at the meaning of that mantra presently. So he's chanting the mantra, and Lord Yama sends his dutas. So the dutas come, but his devotion is so great They cannot approach close enough to take his life. So they go back. Yama himself comes. When Lord Yama comes, he is also not able to come very close, but he has a lasso with a noose at the end of it. So he lassos Mrityunjaya, Markandeya. But Markandeya is holding the Shivalinga. So the noose of the lasso falls over the linga. And when Yama pulls, the linga starts getting pulled. Immediately the linga splits open and Lord Shiva emerges. He says, he's very angry. He says, Yama, what kind of impudence is this? It is said in the Markandeya Purana that when initially there was no death on earth. So everybody was living for a long time. The body was aging, but there was no death. And there were a lot of prayers to Lord Shiva. What shall we do? We are so old, we are so ill, we are so much in pain. So then Lord Shiva decided, I will introduce something called death. And he created Yama. And he said, you take care, you keep karmic records of people with the help of Chitragupta, and you see how long each body should live, and accordingly terminate the lifetime of people so that they don't become old and continue to live in misery for too long. So that, but there is one clause, he told him, you have to obey me at all times. So now Yama is pulling the Shivalinga with a noose, the linga splits open, the story tells us, and Lord Shiva is appeared, he has manifested, and he says, Yama, stop. Don't take the life of Markandeya. But Yama says, no, it is my responsibility. His lifespan is over. You gave him the boon that he's going to die at 16 years. Therefore, I will take the life of Markandeya. It is said that Lord Shiva kills Yama. He kills Yama. He kills death. And after some years, once again, he resurrects Yama. Because otherwise, problems on earth go back to the old stage of people not dying and overpopulation and things like that. So, because he killed Yama and he resurrected Yama, he has full control over death. He is called Mrityunjaya. Lord Shiva was called Mrityunjaya, the conqueror of death, or Kalantaka. Kala is time. So Yama is also called Kala. Kalantaka, Antaka means destroyer. Kala plus Antaka, the destroyer of time. So those are the two names of Lord Shiva. If we look at this legend, we look at the beyond the metaphors and we look at the symbolism. What is the legend trying to tell us? If we just look at that, then Markandeya is the lover of the self. He has surrendered to the self. On one side, he has the love for Lord Shiva. On the other side, fear of death, it didn't seem to be a personal fear for him, but more of fear that it will plunge his parents into sorrow. So he wanted to protect his parents from the sorrow of losing a son. At the same time, he had great love for Lord Shiva. So he is using both the powerful motivators to hold on the self, the Shiva Linga. The Linga actually represents infinity, eternity. So he is holding on to the Shiva Linga. That means all the time to be in awareness of my true nature. Whatever I am doing in life, every moment, always to keep remembering what is my true nature. I am not the body, mind, and intellect. My true nature is infinity, eternity. It is peace, it is bliss. So to be always in a state of awareness, holding on to the Shivalinga means to be in a state of awareness. Yamadutas came, Yama came, nobody could approach close. That means life will come. Life will keep throwing things at us. Pleasant things, unpleasant things. But when I am aware of my true identity, it is all role play. It is like acting in a drama. Nothing really affects me. Life does not have the capacity to trouble my inner peace anymore because I am
Vani,
abiding in the self.
your video is frozen.
My video is frozen. My video is frozen or my slide is frozen.
Your video seems frozen. Slide seems okay.
Okay. Can you see my hand now? I'm waving. For me, it is not frozen. So I think only Ravi or Aniket or whoever is managing, they need to check it.
Nothing is frozen.
Or maybe in your computer, it may be frozen.
Let me
Maybe
check.
your antivirus could freeze it. You just
No,
need to
I'm
go there
getting-
and click.
Actually, I'm getting the picture of just BV and it's going round and round and round. That's all.
Okay, I
Now
think
the
it's
picture
streaming.
of School of Ancient Wisdom picture has come out.
I think we'll leave it alone. It's just, I think,
Yeah. As long
signal
as we-
problem. Okay. So coming back to the inner significance of the story, whatever life brings, even death, Lord of Death coming, that also cannot affect somebody in a state of self-abidance. When Ramana Maharshi was diagnosed that he has bone cancer, he was joking about it. He said, look, a Shivalinga, a tumor that was growing on his elbow, he said, look, a Shivalinga is growing on my arm. And doctors told him that it is cancerous and he may not have much time left. It didn't affect his inner bliss. It didn't affect his peace. It didn't affect the way he was interacting with people. It didn't affect his inner being at all. So even death, even disease, even whatever life throws at you, if you are abiding in the self, if you are aware of your true identity, it is just role play. You're just playing a role, but inside, you know who you are. Amitabh Bachchan, Rajkumar, or any of those people. They're playing a role, they may be acting really well in the film. But inside, they know, I am not this student, I am this beggar, I am not this tortured youth, I am not somebody who has lost my parents. My parents are safe at home. I am Amitabh Bachchan, I am rich. So that inner identification, it does not shake. Just as for you, it does not shake. Like that, the story is telling us the wonderful thing that self-abidance can be. And it is also showing that if you are in a state of surrender, like Markandeya was to Lord Shiva, then the ego struck down and Markandeya is given a boon by Lord Shiva. He will remain ever 16 and he will have an eternal life on earth. So that is a boon he gets from Lord Shiva. And also we can look behind it. Immortality means he gets self-abidance. 16 years means beyond change, beyond birth, beyond death, beyond aging. So for a Jnani who abides in the self, there is no death and inside there is no change because the self is changeless. So what is true immortality? that the Mrityunjaya mantra tells us. Many of you know the Mrityunjaya mantra. Maybe you're doing chanting of this mantra every day. This is the way it goes. Om Tyambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanan Mrityormukshiyamamritaat. So this mantra is saying, we worship the three-eyed Lord, Trayakam, the three-eyed Lord, Yajamahe, we worship Sugandhim, who is fragrant, Pushtivardhanam, who nourishes all beings. Urvarukam, like a Urvarukam is a ripened cucumber. Like a Urva is like a ripened cucumber. Bandhanan is freed from its bondage. When a fruit is ripe, what happens? It falls from the tree. Like that, a ripened cucumber which is bound to the creeper, as it ripens, it falls free of the creeper. So like a ripened cucumber that is freed from its bondage, Mrityo Mukshiya, may he liberate us from death and give us immortality. Ma Amrita. So we are not asking for physical immortality, we are asking for self-abidance. And self-abidance can come when there is vairagya, a ripened cucumber freed from its bondage. What is the creeper? If you allow a creeper, it will go tightly, it will go on growing around a tree. It will hold on very tightly to the tree and keep on winding itself around the tree. So like that, we have allowed this notion, I am the body, mind and intellect. We have allowed that belief to wind itself around us very tightly. It is possible through self-enquiry, it is possible through surrender or self-enquiry to let go of that baggage. Only one bag we need to let go of. We are holding on only to one handle actually. What is that handle? I thought. I am the BMI. If I let go of that handle, all the other appendages are attached to this one I thought only. So I am letting go of everything. Like a ripened cucumber falls free from its bondage to the creeper, let me be able to drop this attachment to the small self so that I become immortal. Dropping attachment to the small self automatically gives me abidance in the self, which is my true nature. Another reason which Mrityunjaya have been used is because of Arunachala. Arunachala hill, which is in Tiruvannamalai. Many of you will have seen it. You would have done maybe Girivalam or circumambulation around the hill. You may have climbed up to see the caves, Skandashram, Virupakshashram, where Bhagwan used to live. Arunachala is itself supposed to be the Agni Linga. It is not the abode of Lord Shiva like Mount Kailash, but the hill itself is the Linga. That is what legend tells us, and that is how everybody treats the hill also. So Bhagwan often said it is effulgent, infinite. Aruna means dawn, the dawning of knowledge, effulgence, infinity. Achala, achala means unmoving. So Isha Upanishad asks a question. It says, what is faster than the mind? Because the mind moves very quickly. If I think of my sister's house in America, the mind is already there in my sister's house. It imagines the view from the living room. It imagines how the garden was. It remembers how I was cooking in the kitchen. So it doesn't need a passport, visa, ticket, nothing. It doesn't care about COVID. No risks are run, but it is already there in the US. So it is so fast, very quick. even faster than snapping your fingers. So the Ishavasya Upanishad says, what is there which is faster than the mind? And then it says, the Brahman is faster. The Brahman is the self. The self is faster than the mind because it is everywhere all the time. So it doesn't have to go from anywhere to anywhere else. It is already there. Wherever you go, it is already there. So nothing can be, in that sense, faster than Brahman. Brahman is unmoving, yes. But because it is there everywhere all the time, it is also the fastest thing. It is a paradox that the Upanishad is drawing. It says the self is unmoving, at the same time, the self is faster than anything else because it is there. Wherever you go, it is already there. Because it is everywhere. So because of Arunachala, for which Bhagwan had great devotion, he would have used the term Mrityunjaya, which is the name of Lord Shiva. And also because of his own experience. Last time also we went through it. When he was a 16-year-old boy, suddenly he was overcome by the fear of death. He was in his uncle's house in Madurai. He was totally healthy. There was no cause for the fear. A pure mind overcome by fear of death. Immediately what did he do? He just lay down on the ground like a corpse and he said, I am dead. And this body will be taken to the burial ground and burned. But am I? Do I cease to exist? And then suddenly there was this shift in his identity. And he understood that he was the eternal self. He was not the body, mind, or intellect. So because this was his catapulting force, he said that he used this Mrityu Bhaya in the second invocatory shloka to show that it can also be a very swift path to guidance if you use it constructively. Then the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna and Krishna, we know that they were always their cousins, their close friends. He's their mentor. He's their protector. There is great love between them. But it is only in the battlefield when Arjuna, who wanted to kill all the Pandavas, he had this burning anger inside him. But suddenly when he sees all of them lined up in front of him, his grandfather, his cousins, his friends, his guru, all of them are there on the opposite camp. They're all standing. Then he says, Krishna, we will be overcome by sin. We are committing a great papa if we kill all these people. Yes, they are aggressors. They have flouted dharma, but if we kill all of them, what will we gain, Krishna? How can we be happy by killing our own kinsmen? So, the fear of flouting dharma, the fear of committing a sin, that fear suddenly made him look at Krishna in the light of Lord, or look at him as a guru, and made him surrender to the Lord. So one more case where fear worked very, very powerfully. Then we come to Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, there is sage Yajnavalkya. He had a huge Vedic university. Thousands of students would come and learn there and go. And he had two wives, Katyayani and Maitreyi. So as Yajnavalkya, he grew old, he said to both his wives, it is time that I retire from transactional life. I would like to retire into a life of meditation. Therefore, I will share whatever property I have between the two of you so that you will continue to be comfortable. Please give me permission to go and continue my sadhana with greater intensity. So Katyayani, the first wife, has always been she's a model housewife, taking care of all the arrangements of the household and the ashram. And that has been her role. Whereas Maitreyi, the younger wife, likes to sit in when the teaching is happening. She listens to spiritual discussions. She has gained the reputation of being a Brahmavadini, a knower of scripture. So she listens and then she says, I have a question. You are giving up all this and you are going. If I have all the wealth in the world, if whatever I possess, my possessions are so many that it fills this entire world, will I gain immortality? Then Yajnavalkya says, no, Katyayani, no Maitreyi, it cannot give you immortality. You will be comfortable, just like any wealthy person. You will be able to spend your days, rest of your days very comfortably, all your needs taken care of, but it cannot give you immortality. So then she says, then tell me that which will give me immortality. Because I am not interested in all this, it can't give me something that is eternal. So then Yajnavalkya says, like a lump of salt, if you throw a lump of salt into water, it dissolves in the water. And after that, you can taste it in the water, but you cannot take out the salt. In the same way, when you stop separating yourself, when you stop identifying yourself, identifying the self with the body, mind, and intellect, then your identification, it will dissolve. And when your identification with the BMI dissolves, there is no more separate self. There is only one universal cosmic self, which is the eternal infinite substratum. So it teaches her the secret of immortality, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Then we have Jiddu Krishnamurti. So during one of his talks, I have referred to the talk also in the slide, when he was talking about fear, about the root of fear, he says, what is fear after all? I want to be something. That is fear. That means I want to become something. I am not that now, but I want to become something. So the feeling that I am not that, I want to become that, it creates fear. He says not only in a narrow sense, that means not in a narrow sense like I am not a doctor. If I do MBBS, I will become a doctor. That also creates fear. Will I get in? Will I get enough marks? Will I complete the course? When I come out, will I be a good doctor? All that is there. But that's a very specific, narrow example. But he says in the widest sense. In the widest sense, what do I think? Right now, I am not enlightened, but I must become enlightened. But the scriptures are telling us, even right now you are the self. You don't have to become the self. You are that. Only thing is you're identifying with the wrong thing. So you just need to let that go. That's all. So the minute there is an urge inside, I want to become something which I am not at present, that is why fear is there. So we have ignored what we are, and we are trying to, because I'm identifying with my body, mind, and intellect, I want to become a good housewife. I want to become a good mother. I want to become a good father. I want to become a good child who will take care of my parents in their old age. I want to become. So that is called Bhavaroga, the disease of becoming. I only postpone. If I do this, then I will be happy. Till then, I will remain this miserable self. The Vedas are telling us, scriptures are telling us, Bhagavan is telling us, you already are that, you are that. Why are you thinking you are not that? Why are you thinking you must become that? That is the root of fear. That is Marana Bhaya. So, you are that. To realize the true identity, that is immortality. So, for 2 minutes, can we sit straight? Close our eyes. To go into Nididhyasa at any time. Nididhyasa means abiding as the self. Should go in with knowledge fresh in your mind, which is why we have dhyana shlokas. So Bhagwan has given us this knowledge very fresh. I'm infinite, I'm eternal, I'm immortal. Even right now, I am bliss, I am peace, I am the self, I am. Just stay there. I exist. I know that I exist. Most natural thing. The only direct knowledge that I have is that I exist. Just stay there. If your attention wanders, if thoughts come and go, let them come and go. Just stay there, I am. But if your attention happens to wander and you become aware of it, come back. Don't get into blame games. Just come. I am. The body, mind, and intellect are instruments. They are not me. I am immortal. I am bliss and peace. I am. You can abide in I am anytime, anywhere, for a few seconds, minutes, hours, whatever is available to you, whatever is within your reach. Let us offer our pranams at the lotus feet of Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi for the amazing wisdom that he has given us through the shloka of Sattarshana. May His grace always be with each one of us. May it keep this awareness alive within us. Slowly open your eyes. But even with your eyes open, remain aware of I am, I exist, most natural being. I would not like to call it state. It's your nature. Once again, I thank the School of Ancient Wisdom and each and every one of you for being part of this session. And may all beings be happy. Marty, over to you.
Thank you, Vani. Anybody has any questions? Please either put it in the chat or raise your hand and you vocally ask it, and Vani will answer. There is one question in the chat box by Smita who asks,
Okay.
has Shiva no death?
Has
Has
Shiva no
Shiva
death?
no death here?
Okay. I'm still audible, right? I'm not very sure.
Very clear. No, very
Clear.
clear, very
Okay.
clear. Yeah.
Okay. Can you see me also?
Yes?
Okay.
No, no,
Fine.
yeah, I can. Yeah, thank you.
I have to stop presenting. So, Smita, Shiva, the very word Shiva means auspiciousness. So they're referring to Shiva as a deity, or are we referring to Shiva as the self? Shiva actually is he's a representation of your own true nature. He is awareness. And we are all awareness. The self is awareness. The self has no death. So, according to the Puranas, the deity Shiva also has no death. And according to the scriptures, Shiva represents the self, and the self has no death. It is beyond birth, beyond death. That is why if you look at the image of deity of Shiva, Shiva has his eyes half closed, state of complete awareness of his true nature, which is what each one of us, our true nature is also the same. He is indicating to us. So we are worshipping the self through Shiva. We are worshipping our own nature through Shiva, worshipping our own nature through Vishnu, through Devi, through Krishna, through Ganesha. So the deity is it is through the deity we are worshipping. It is just a focal point which transfers us to the self. To any deity, we are actually worshipping the self. Any other questions?
Any other questions? I will just read out some of the praises that have come to you. Thank you, Vani. Padmini says, for an excellent exposition on the second stanza of Satdarshanam. The examples and anecdotes were very helpful in helping in bringing out the underlying meaning of the stanza.
Okay.
And Ramesh Daswani and Sri Devi also, thank you very much. And Vidya, who missed a part of the talk, is hoping to watch the recorded video later.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you. I thank each and every one of you for your good wishes, your positive feedback. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vani, for the wonderful way you covered the second introductory slotra of Saptarshanam. The first sloka you covered was on self-inquiry. The second one was on surrender. One seeks refuge in God or Guru because of fear of death, and ego dies or is lost swiftly when one surrenders to Mrityunjaya. Only the self, which is immortal, remains, and those souls who surrender to God or their Guru, their egos, then where is the opportunity for them to be assailed by the thought of death? When I am immortal, how can I be assailed by the thought of death? Fear and the desire just tend to disappear in the state of abidance. So, abidance in immortality leads to bliss. At this stage, I would like to thank the organizers as well as the participants and tell them that on the 5th of February, which is the next Friday, the third session in this series will be presented by Vani, who will continue with her talks at 6:30 p.m. Please do attend, and I will announce that at this point that there is sessions on tomorrow morning by Indra Bangar on meditation, and Sunday morning there'll be Atma Bodha by Sri Krishnapani, and details of all this will be posted on the School of Ancient Wisdom WhatsApp. So please check out and please attend. And I would also like at this point to thank the organizers and the participants again, and Vani especially, for having kept us regaled so much. If Vasu is present, can you please recite the Shanti Mantra?
Yeah, thank you, Malti. I'm here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, please do.
All right, so let's relax. We have had a wonderful session on the second stanza of Saddarshanam by Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi. Received this wonderful jnana from Vani on the truth of the detailed meaning of the second stanza for the wonderful vibrations. Let us, and we have absorbed them, let us spread it out to all beings in all planes of existence. Let us close our eyes. Keeping ourselves on mute, let us chant the Shanti Mantra 3 times. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vasu.